In 1939, a man walked into a therapist's office in New York City carrying a stack of drawings. He was 27 years old, and he was falling apart. He couldn't speak about what was inside him, so his doctor asked him to draw it instead. Those drawings became the foundation of the most revolutionary paintings of the 20th century. His name was Jackson Pollock. And the story of how his art was born, not from inspiration, but from desperation, is one of the most misunderstood chapters in art history. To understand what happened in that therapist's office, you need to understand what came before. Jackson Pollock grew up in the American West, the youngest of 5 brothers. His father was mostly absent, an alcoholic drifter who left the family when Jackson was still a boy. His mother was cold, demanding, and obsessed with the idea that her sons would be great, not loved, not safe, great. By 16, Pollock was drinking. By 20, he was in New York studying art under Thomas Hart Benton, originalist painter who taught him classical technique. And Pollock was good. His early work was figurative, disciplined, grounded in the realist tradition. He could draw the human form with precision. He understood composition, light, shadow, all the fundamentals. But something was wrong inside him. He was volatile, insecure, prone to outbursts he couldn't control. He drank to silence the noise in his head, and the drinking made everything worse. By 1938, he was having what we would now call a breakdown. He was hospitalized. He was diagnosed, though the diagnoses of that era were crude and often contradictory. What was clear was this: Jackson Pollock was a man at war with himself, and he was losing. In 1939, he was sent to a Jungian analyst named Dr. Joseph Henderson, and this is where the story changes. Jungian analysis, developed by Carl Jung, is built on the idea that the unconscious mind speaks in symbols, not in words. Dreams, myths, archetypes. The analyst's job is to help the patient decode those symbols and integrate what Jung called the shadow, the hidden, repressed, rejected parts of the self. Pollock was a terrible patient. He sat in sessions in near silence. He couldn't or wouldn't articulate what tormented him. The words weren't there, or they were too dangerous to say out loud. So Henderson tried something unusual. He asked Pollock to bring drawings to their sessions. Not finished artwork, not paintings, just raw, unfiltered drawings, whatever came out. And Pollock did. Over 18 months, he brought Henderson 83 drawings. What's extraordinary about these drawings is what they contain. They're full of Jungian symbolism, half-human figures, mythological creatures, eyes, spirals, mandala-like forms. They look like someone trying to map the inside of their own mind, because that's exactly what they were. Henderson interpreted them as representations of Pollock's unconscious. He saw the shadow pouring out onto the page. The drawings weren't art in any conventional sense. They were diagnosis. They were a man who couldn't speak, speaking in the only language he had. Think about that for a second. The paintings that would one day hang in the Museum of Modern Art, that would sell for hundreds of millions of dollars, that would redefine what art could be, they started as therapy homework, as a clinical tool, as a last resort for a man who had run out of words. But here's where it gets remarkable. The therapy worked, not completely, not permanently, but for a window of time. The process of externalizing his inner chaos onto paper gave Pollock something he had never had before, a sense of control over his own mind. In 1943, the art collector Peggy Guggenheim commissioned Pollock to paint a mural for her Manhattan townhouse. The commission was a statement of faith. Guggenheim was betting that this difficult, unstable, barely known artist was about to do something important. Pollock delivered. The result was simply called Mural, a canvas nearly 2.5 meters tall and over 6 meters wide. It was the largest painting he had ever attempted, and it was the bridge between the private therapeutic drawings and the public revolutionary work that would follow. The painting is a wall of movement, figures dissolving into gesture, forms that seem to be in the middle of becoming something else. You can see the Jungian symbolism still present, but now it's looser, more physical, more urgent. The careful, guarded drawings were opening up into something raw. There's a myth that Pollock painted mural in one feverish night. The reality is more interesting. He painted it during a period of relative stability, one of the few stretches of his life where the inner machinery was working the way it was supposed to. The therapy hadn't cured him, but it had given him a method. Take what's inside, put it outside. Don't edit, don't explain, just let it move. By 1947, Pollock made a decision that would define his legacy. He stopped using traditional brushes. He laid his canvases flat on the floor of his barn in Springs, New York, and he started pouring, dripping, and flicking paint directly onto them from above. Now let's look at the paintings themselves, because once you know the context, every single element reads differently. The drip paintings aren't random. They're not the work of a man flinging paint without thought. They are controlled chaos, the same principle that governed those 83 therapeutic drawings. Pollock was still doing what Henderson had taught him, externalizing the unconscious, letting it flow through his hands onto the surface, but now with a physicality and scale that turned private psychology into public spectacle. He worked in stages, weeks of contemplation followed by bursts of painting. He'd walk around the canvas, approaching it from all sides, letting the composition emerge from his body's movement rather than from a predetermined plan. The canvas wasn't a window to look through, it was an arena to act in, and then he did something that people still argue about today. He stopped titling his paintings, he started numbering them. Number 1, number 5, number 11. When asked why, Pollock said, "Numbers are neutral. They make people look at a picture for what it is, pure painting. On the surface, it sounds like an aesthetic philosophy, a statement about abstract art, but there's a deeper reading. This was a man who had spent years in therapy learning that words were inadequate, that the rational, language-based self couldn't contain what he felt. The titles were another form of explanation, and Pollock had learned, through Jungian analysis, that explanation was a trap. The drawing said what it needed to say. The painting said what it needed to say. Adding a title was like trying to put a fence around something that was meant to be wild. The numbering wasn't a pose. It was a symptom. A man who had never been able to put words to his inner world, deciding that his art didn't need words either. Which interpretation do you believe? That the numbering was a deliberate artistic philosophy, or that it was something deeper, something he may not have fully understood himself? Comment below. I read every single one. If you're finding this story as compelling as I do, hit subscribe. We go behind another masterpiece every week. And the stories are never what you were taught. Between 1948 and 1950, Pollock was sober. He was productive. He was, by many accounts, as close to happy as he ever got. He had married the painter Lee Krasner, who was herself a formidable artist, and they lived and worked in the Long Island barn that would become his studio. This was the period of his greatest work, Autumn Rhythm. Number 1, 1950, Lavender Mist. These are the paintings that cemented his reputation as the most important American artist of the century. The critics called him a genius. Life magazine asked, in a now famous 1949 article, "Is he the greatest living painter in the United States?" But the question no one was asking was simpler and sadder. What happens when the healing stops working? Because it did stop, slowly, then all at once. Pollock started drinking again. The sobriety that had held the chaos at bay began to erode. He became withdrawn, angry, difficult. His relationship with Krasner deteriorated. He started painting less, and what he produced was darker, denser, more troubled. The black pourings of 1951 to 1953 are the work of a man watching his own stability dissolve. He began an affair with a young artist named Ruth Kligman. Krasner, exhausted and heartbroken, left for Europe in June of 1956. She needed distance, she needed to breathe. Pollock was alone, On the evening of August 11th, 1956, Jackson Pollock drove his Oldsmobile convertible on a winding road near his home in Springs, Long Island. He had been drinking. Ruth Kligman was in the car. So was her friend Edith Metzger. The car left the road. It overturned. Pollock was killed instantly. He was 44 years old. Edith Metzger also died. Ruth Kligman survived. That is the fact of what happened. It is not the meaning. The story of Jackson Pollock is usually told as the story of a genius who drank too much and died too young. But that's not the story, not really. The real story is about a man who was broken at 27, who couldn't speak about his pain, who was given a piece of paper and told to draw what was inside him, and who turned that act of desperate self-expression into the most original art of his century. The drip paintings that we reproduce on posters and in textbooks and on coffee mugs, they began as therapy, as diagnosis, as a man trying to survive his own mind. And yet, the art that saved him temporarily could not save him permanently. The canvas absorbed his chaos. Life did not. The healing almost worked. For a few years, in a barn on Long Island with the light coming through the windows and the paint pooling on the floor, Jackson Pollock was the version of himself he wanted to be. Sober, creating, alive. But the thing about healing is that it's not a destination, it's a process. And processes can stop. Somewhere in those layers of paint, in the rhythm of the drips, in the sweep of the gestures, in the controlled chaos that a Jungian therapist helped him find, there is a man saying, I was here, I was suffering, and I made something anyway. When we put his paintings on posters and phone cases and coffee mugs, we flatten them. We turn them into decoration. We forget that a human being made them at enormous personal cost. Hit subscribe. Next week, another painting, another story hidden behind the canvas, one that will change the way you see it forever.